The smell hit me first. Leather and lavender and something else I couldn't name. Something that didn't belong in a backpack I'd found in a thrift store for $8. I'd been carrying it for 3 weeks before I noticed the weight was wrong. Not heavy exactly, but distributed strangely, like there was something sewn into the lining that shifted when I walked. I was sitting in the university library at 2 in the morning, the only time I could study without my roommates asking to borrow money I didn't have, when my pen rolled off the table and disappeared into the bag's front pocket. When I reached in to find it, my fingers brushed against fabric that felt too thick, too deliberate. The hidden pocket was sewn so carefully into the seam that I'd mistaken it for reinforcement. Inside was a small brass key, tarnished green at the edges, attached to a leather tag embossed with a symbol I recognized immediately. Everyone in the country would recognize it. The royal crest of the Ashford family, the same one printed on our currency, carved into government buildings, displayed in every museum. I should have thrown it away right then. I should have left it in the library trash and gone back to my shift at the campus cafeteria like my life wasn't about to fracture into before and after. But I was a scholarship student who wore the same 3 outfits on rotation and ate ramen for dinner 4 nights a week. I was curious, and curiosity, I would learn, was a luxury I couldn't afford. The backpack itself had caught my eye because it looked expensive despite the thrift store price tag. Real leather, hand-stitched, with brass buckles that still gleamed under the grime. The woman at the register had looked at me strangely when I bought it. "You sure you want that one?" she'd asked, her fingers hovering over the scanner. "Found it in a donation box outside. No note, no name, just appeared one morning." I'd thought she was trying to upsell me to something newer. Now I wondered what she'd seen that I hadn't. The first time someone followed me, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. It was Thursday, late afternoon, and I was walking from my economics lecture to the bus stop. The man in the gray suit was probably just another businessman cutting through campus, except he'd been standing outside the lecture hall when I left, and he was still half a block behind me when I boarded the bus, and when I glanced back through the window, he was watching me with the kind of focused attention that made my stomach clench. I got off 3 stops early and took a different route home. He didn't follow, but the prickle of unease stayed with me all night. The second time was Saturday morning. I was at the farmer's market, trying to find vegetables cheap enough to fit my weekly budget of $37. A woman in designer sunglasses and a silk scarf stood near the tomato stand, not shopping, just watching. When I moved to the next vendor, she moved too. When I ducked into the public bathroom and waited 5 minutes before emerging, she was still there, pretending to examine a display of honey jars. I went home and locked my door and pulled out the key again, holding it up to the light like it might explain itself. The crest was unmistakable, a crowned lion holding a sword and an olive branch. Beneath it, engraved so small I needed my phone's flashlight to read it, were the letters VMA and a number, 1847. I did what any desperate, frightened student would do. I Googled it. For hours, I scrolled through images of royal artifacts and historical documents, looking for any mention of VMA or the number 1847. Most results were tourist information about the Ashford Palace or conspiracy theories about the royal family's net worth. Nothing about keys, nothing that made sense of why this was in my backpack. Then I found an archived newspaper article from 1992, scanned and uploaded to a historical database. The headline read, "Royal Family's Private Vault Relocated Following Security Breach." The article was brief, mentioning that certain personal artifacts and documents had been moved from the palace to an undisclosed location after an attempted theft. The vault was referred to by its construction year, 1847. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set my phone down. This wasn't just any key. This was access to something the royal family wanted protected badly enough to move it and hide it and never speak of it publicly again. And it was in my backpack, which I'd bought for $8 from a thrift store that couldn't tell me where it came from. I should have gone to the police. I should have called the palace's public line and explained that I'd found something that belonged to them. But I'd grown up poor enough to know that people like me didn't get the benefit of the doubt. If I walked into a police station with a key to the royal vault, I wouldn't be treated as a good Samaritan. I'd be treated as a thief, or worse, an accomplice to something I didn't understand. So, I did nothing. I hid the key in my drawer beneath my scholarship paperwork and tried to pretend everything was normal. But the people watching me knew better. On Monday, a man showed up at my work. He didn't order food, didn't sit down, just stood at the edge of the cafeteria with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on me as I wiped tables. When my supervisor asked if he needed help, he smiled and said he was waiting for someone. He waited for my entire shift. When I finally gathered the courage to leave through the back entrance, he was gone. That night, someone tried my apartment door. I heard the handle rattle at 3 in the morning, a soft, testing pressure like someone checking if it was locked. I lay frozen in my bed, my phone clutched in my hand, debating whether to call for help. The sound stopped after a minute. In the morning, I found fresh scratches around the lock. I knew then that staying quiet wasn't protecting me. It was just delaying whatever was coming. The backpack had one more secret. I found it by accident on Tuesday night when I was packing for class and the bottom panel shifted under my textbooks. It wasn't a false bottom exactly, more like a reinforced compartment that had come loose at the seams from years of use. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age, covered in handwriting so elegant it looked like calligraphy. The letter was dated April 19, 1998. It began, "My dearest Victoria." I read it 3 times before I understood what I was holding. It was a love letter written by someone named Michael to someone named Victoria, talking about their secret meetings and the impossible situation they were in. "Your family will never accept me," he wrote. "My blood isn't pure enough, my name not old enough. But what we've created together is more precious than any crown." At the bottom, in different handwriting, shakier and more urgent, was a note. "Keep this safe. If anything happens to me, you'll need proof. The key is for her future. VMA, Victoria Margaret Ashford. She must never know unless there's no other choice." Victoria Margaret Ashford. The name was familiar in the distant way that royal family trees are familiar to citizens who don't follow monarchy news closely. I looked her up on my phone, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Princess Victoria Margaret Ashford had been the youngest daughter of the king's brother, a minor royal known mostly for charity work and avoiding scandal. She died in a car accident in 2003, along with her driver, on a rain-slicked road in the countryside. She was 31. The funeral was private. There were no surviving children listed in her official biography. Except that couldn't be right, because the letter talked about what we've created together in a way that could only mean one thing. And someone had hidden this key and this letter in a backpack with instructions to keep it safe for her future. My hands were numb as I searched deeper, looking for anything about Victoria's personal life, her relationships, any hint of a secret pregnancy. Royal gossip blogs mentioned she'd spent time abroad in 1997 and early 1998, studying art in Florence. She'd returned to England in late 1998 looking notably thin and exhausted, according to one tabloid archive. But the palace had dismissed concerns as stress from her academic workload. I did the math. If she'd been pregnant in early 1998 and given birth in secret, the child would be 26 now, the same age as me. The room tilted. I sat down on my bed and forced myself to breathe slowly, to think logically. This didn't mean anything. Coincidences happened. I was reading too much into a letter that could have belonged to anyone who'd owned this backpack before me. But the key was real, the watchers were real, and the scratches on my lock were real. I needed help, but I didn't know who to trust. The police seemed dangerous. A lawyer would cost money I didn't have. My friends were other broke students who could barely handle their own problems. The only person I could think of was Professor Chen, my history instructor, who'd written her dissertation on 20th century European monarchy and sometimes stayed late in her office to help students who were struggling. I found her on Wednesday afternoon, grading papers in the dim light of her cramped office. When I knocked, she looked up with the kind of tired smile that professors wear 3 weeks before finals. "Come in, what can I do for you?" I closed the door behind me. "I need to ask you something about the Ashford family, off the record." Her face faded. "What kind of something?" I pulled out the letter and handed it to her. I watched her face as she read, watched the confusion turn to shock, turn to something harder to read. When she finished, she folded it carefully and handed it back to me. "Where did you get this?" "I found it in a backpack, along with a key that has the royal crest and the numbers 1847. "Do you have the key with you?" I showed her. She held it up to the light, examined the engraving, and then set it down on her desk like it might explode. "This is very serious. If this is authentic, you're holding evidence of one of the most protected secrets in modern royal history." "So it's real? Victoria had a child?" "There were rumors," Professor Chen said carefully. "Nothing confirmed. The palace is very good at burying stories they don't like. But I knew someone who worked in the royal archives, and she told me once that there were documents related to Victoria that were classified above even the usual royal privacy protections, sealed permanently, the kind of sealing they only do for national security matters or scandals that could damage the monarchy itself." "What kind of scandal?" "The kind where a princess falls in love with a commoner, gets pregnant, and is forced to give up the child to protect the family's reputation. The kind where that child might have a legitimate claim to royal privileges, maybe even the line of succession if the truth came out." She paused. "The kind where people who know too much sometimes have accidents." The words hung between us. "The Watchers?" I said. "People have been following me. Someone tried my door." Professor Chen's expression darkened. "You need to be very careful. If someone knows you have this key, they'll want it back, either to protect the secret or to use it against the family. Either way, you're in danger." "What should I do?" She thought for a long moment. "The vault. If the key is real and it opens something, whatever's inside might have answers. Birth records, legal documents, something that explains why you have this and what they're trying to hide. But you can't go alone, and you can't trust anyone connected to the palace." "I don't even know where the vault is." "I might," she said. "Give me until tomorrow. I'll make some calls to colleagues who specialize in royal properties. Discreet calls. In the meantime, don't go home. Stay with friends, stay in public places, and don't let that key out of your sight." I spent that night on a friend's couch, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. In the morning, Professor Chen texted me an address in the countryside, 2 hours north of the city, along with a warning. "The property is abandoned officially, used to be a royal hunting lodge. Basement level was converted to storage in 1992. Be careful." She met me at the train station with a rental car and a serious expression. We didn't talk much on the drive. The countryside rolled past in shades of green and gold, beautiful and indifferent to the fact that my entire understanding of my life was potentially about to change. The hunting lodge was set back from the road, hidden behind overgrown hedges and a rusted gate. It looked forgotten, windows dark, paint peeling, the kind of place that belonged to the past. We parked and approached on foot, and I felt the weight of being watched again, though I saw no one. The front door was locked, but a side entrance near the kitchen had been left unsecured, the wood swollen and warped from years of rain. Inside, the lodge was cold and musty, filled with furniture covered in white sheets that looked like ghosts in the dim light. Professor Chen led the way with a flashlight, following a floor plan she'd printed from an architectural database. The basement stairs were behind a door I would have mistaken for a closet. They descended into darkness that the flashlight barely touched. Stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. At the bottom was a corridor lined with doors, each marked with a number. We found 1847 at the end, a heavy wooden door with a brass lock plate that matched the key perfectly. My hands shook as I inserted the key. It turned smoothly, like it had been oiled recently, like someone still cared for this place despite its abandoned appearance. The door opened on hinges that didn't creak. Inside was a small room, windowless, with a single table and a metal filing cabinet. On the table was a leather box, and inside the box were documents: birth certificate, DNA test results, photographs, legal affidavits, a will. I read them in silence, Professor Chen reading over my shoulder, and with each page my life split further away from the person I'd been that morning in the library 3 weeks ago. Victoria Margaret Ashford had given birth to a daughter on November 3, 1998, in a private clinic in Switzerland. The father, Michael Chen, no relation to my professor, was a historian she'd met during her studies, a commoner with no title, no fortune, nothing the royal family would accept. The palace had given her an ultimatum: either end the pregnancy or give up the child and never speak of it again. She'd chosen the child. She'd carried me to term and spent 3 days with me before they took me away. In those 3 days, she'd arranged for samples to be taken, documentation to be made, proof that I was hers just in case. She'd hidden it all here in the vault, with instructions that if anything happened to her, the information should be given to me on my 25th birthday. But she'd died when I was 5, and the only person she'd trusted with the information, a lady-in-waiting named Margaret, had apparently panicked. Instead of going through official channels, Margaret had hidden the backpack, the key, everything, waiting for the right moment that never came. When she'd died last year, I found her obituary on my phone dated 6 months ago. Her belongings had been donated to charity, including a backpack she'd kept locked in her closet for 20 years. The backpack I'd bought for $8. The DNA results confirmed it. Victoria Margaret Ashford was my biological mother. My father, Michael Chen, had died in 2001, 2 years before Victoria's car accident, an accident I was no longer sure was an accident at all. I sat down on the cold stone floor and tried to process what this meant. I was royalty. I had Ashford blood. I had rights, potentially, to titles, to money, to a life so far removed from student loans and cafeteria shifts that it felt like fiction. But I'd also been erased, hidden, considered dangerous enough to the monarchy that my mother had been forced to choose between her family and me. And when she'd tried to leave me proof of who I was, people had died. Maybe they'd been killed. What do I do? I asked Professor Chen, my voice small in the empty room.
That depends on what you want, she said. You could go public, take this evidence to the media, force the palace to acknowledge you. You'd win, legally. The DNA alone would be enough. But you'd spend the rest of your life under scrutiny, fighting with lawyers, becoming a symbol instead of a person. What's the alternative? You could walk away, leave the documents here, destroy the key, go back to your life. Let the secret stay buried. I looked at the photographs spread across the table. Victoria holding me as a newborn, her face exhausted and radiant. Victoria writing letters I'd never received, explaining why she'd made the choices she'd made, telling me she loved me even though we'd never meet. Michael, young and smiling, his arm around Victoria, both of them looking at the camera like they believed their love was strong enough to overcome anything. They'd been wrong. Love hadn't been enough. But they'd tried. They'd documented everything, left me proof, given me a choice they'd never had. There's a third option, I said slowly. I could use this as leverage, not to become a princess or claim inheritance, but to make sure this never happens again, to make sure the palace can't erase people, can't force women to choose between family and children, can't kill people who know too much. Professor Chen raised an eyebrow. That's ambitious and dangerous. So was buying a backpack at a thrift store, apparently. We left the vault with the documents secured in my bag, my mother's bag, I realized, and drove back to the city in thoughtful silence. I spent the next week consulting with lawyers who specialized in royal affairs, showing them the evidence, building a case not for public revelation, but for private negotiation. The palace's response came through official channels. A representative contacted me, very polite, very careful, offering a settlement, a sum of money large enough to pay off my student loans, buy a house, never work again if I chose, in exchange for my silence, for surrendering the documents, for agreeing legally that Victoria had never had a child. I turned them down. The second offer was larger. The third included a minor title, a stipend, a position at a royal charity. Each offer came with the same condition: silence. I turned them all down. Finally, they agreed to meet my terms: a private foundation in Victoria's name, dedicated to supporting women forced to make impossible choices about their children. A review of palace policies regarding royal family members' personal relationships, an acknowledgement, private but legally binding, that I was Victoria's daughter with all the rights that entailed, though I agreed to not use the title publicly or involve myself in royal affairs. And one more thing: the truth about the car accident. They gave me the real investigation files, the ones that showed the brake lines had been tampered with, the ones that proved Victoria hadn't died accidentally. She'd been planning to go public about me, to fight for the right to be my mother openly, and someone decided that was too dangerous to allow. The palace claimed they hadn't ordered it. They claimed it was a rogue security official acting on his own, someone who died of a heart attack years ago. Very convenient. I didn't believe them. But I had what I wanted: proof that my mother loved me enough to die for me, and the knowledge that her death wouldn't be forgotten. I kept the backpack. I kept the key, though the vault is empty now, the documents secured in a safety deposit box my lawyers arranged. Sometimes I run my fingers over the worn leather and think about the path it took to find me, from Victoria's hands to Margaret's closet, to a donation box, to a thrift store shelf, to my shoulders, carrying the weight of a secret across 26 years and 3 deaths, until it finally came home. I finished my degree. I started working with the foundation, helping other women whose families couldn't accept their choices, who needed support and resources, and someone who understood what it meant to be unwanted by people who should have loved you unconditionally. The palace sends quarterly reports on their policy changes, small steps toward allowing royal family members more freedom in their personal lives. It's not enough, but it's something. And sometimes, late at night, I look at the photographs of Victoria and think about parallel lives, the one where she was allowed to keep me, to raise me, to be my mother in daylight instead of in secret documents and hidden rooms, the one where we had time. But I also think about the life I did have, the strength I built from being poor, from fighting for everything, from learning that I was worth more than the circumstances I was born into. Victoria gave me that in a way. She gave me up so I could survive, and she left me the tools to understand why, and she trusted that I'd be strong enough to handle the truth when I found it. I was. I am. The backpack sits by my door now, ready for whatever comes next. It's battered and scarred, and more valuable than anything the palace could offer me. It carried a secret across time,
And it taught me that sometimes the most precious inheritances aren't titles or fortunes, they're the truth and the courage to decide what to do with it. That's what Victoria really left me. Not a key to a vault, but a choice about what kind of person I wanted to be. And every day I choose to be someone she'd be proud of, someone who doesn't hide, someone who fights for the truth, even when it's dangerous, even when it costs everything. Someone who knows that being royal isn't about blood or crowns. It's about honoring the people who loved us enough to make impossible sacrifices, and making sure their sacrifices meant something. The backpack was never just mine. It was hers first, and Margaret's after, and now it's mine in a line of women who kept secrets and told truths, and tried to protect something precious in a world that wanted to destroy it. I carry it proudly, every day, a reminder of where I came from and who I'm fighting for. And sometimes, when the light hits the brass buckles just right, I swear I can smell lavender, and I know Victoria's still with me, still proud, still believing that love, messy and complicated and imperfect as it is always worth fighting for.